Okay, so we're going to be talking today about the righteous standing for the unrighteous, and just some concepts within the Bible, within the Torah, the foundation, right through into the New Testament, and just examining some of the passages and thinking, just to show that it's a consistent perspective to look at from the Torah right through to the New Testament. I just want to do, before we actually jump into the passage, I think just maybe some background might help if I refer to certain literature that maybe you might not heard of, just to show the rabbinic perspective, just so you are aware that this literature does exist. So I just want to quickly, hold on. So I just wanted to first say, from our perspective, what we do within mpeg1video is we have weekly Torah readings. So that's from the Old Testament, the Tanakh, where we read each week and we go through the passages step by step. It's a very, very important thing. That is the basis. It's the word of the Almighty. That is where we establish our belief from. Anything that wavers from that, we consider as not biblical. We focus primarily on the biblical text. I think that's just an important concept when we approach it and how we approach these various topics. Similarly with the New Testament as well, we go through that. So the reason why that's important is I just wanted to, for instance, show you might be familiar with, let's just say, a standard English translation. This is a New American Standard, and just to give you an idea of what we need to be cognizant of when we approach a topic like this, particularly when we're dealing with Jewish concepts, so-called Messianic or Christian concepts. How do we actually deal with that? So if I just wanted to show you an example. You won't be able to see the detail, but this, if you look here, we've got our text, our biblical text, down the left and the right. And in the middle there you have verse numbers, and then in those verse numbers are different other passages, and what that is that's commentary on the text. So it's important to recognize the text versus commentary. And what we have within the Jewish community, you also have what we call the Talmud, and the Talmud is a compilation of commentary on the text. So we see similar patterns of religious thinking, religious thought on that. So I'm certainly not somebody who proclaims to be an expert in identifying all the correct rabbinic sources on literature. However, when I've pulled any material on there, I want to make sure that I've conveyed something that is accurate. So I've reverted to sources such as Jewish Encyclopedia, where it's very scholarly of people to show that these are perspectives. I've also sourced information from Wikipedia. Now that's a public source of information, and what's very interesting about Wikipedia is that anything that is not, let's put it, if it's controversial, it very easily gets pulled by whoever it is, because you've got so many different people with different perspectives. So it's actually quite a useful source of information when you're trying to find certain things. So I just wanted to maybe just sort of give that introduction on that. But I just want to re-emphasize our perspective as mpeg1video is that the Tanakh, the Old Testament, is fundamentally important for us to understand. It is the word of Yahweh. It is His word, and the New Testament as well. We consider it His word. Those are the primary basis that we derive our knowledge and our relationship with Him. So does that help to just maybe clarify for anybody new, or do you want me to explain anything else? Okay, so what I thought we would do today is, if we're considering this aspect of the righteous standing for the unrighteous, I think there's some very good places to go and think about it. And what I'd like to do is start with the father of faith, with Abraham. I think he's a very, very important character, and someone who we can really derive a very good understanding of some aspects. So we're going to be reading from the book of Genesis. And we are going to turn to Genesis chapter 18. Okay, so Genesis 18, and we're going to look from verse, sorry. Okay, so verse 16, we're going to start in the middle. So we're going to read the passage and then we're going to discuss a few concepts in there. Then the men rose up from there and looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham was walking with them to send them off. Yahweh said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation. In him all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. For I have chosen him so that he might command his children and his household after him to keep the way of Yahweh by doing righteousness and justice, that Yahweh may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about." And Yahweh said, "The outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave. I will go down and now see if they have done entirely according to its outcry, which has come to me, and if not, I will know." Then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom, while Abraham was still standing before Yahweh. Abraham came near and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you indeed sweep it away and not spare the space, and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you, shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly?" So Yahweh said, "If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare the whole city on their account." And Abraham replied, "Now behold, I have ventured to speak to Yahweh, although I am but dust and ashes. Suppose the 50 righteous are lacking 5. Will you destroy the whole city because of 5? And he said, "I will not destroy it, even if I find 45 there." He spoke to him yet again and said, "Suppose 40 are found there." And he said, "I will not do it on account of the 40. Then he said, "Oh, my master, may my master not be angry, and I shall speak. Suppose 30 are found there." And he said, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." And he said, "Now behold, I have ventured to speak to the master. Suppose 20 are found there." And he said, "I will not destroy it on account of the 20. Then he said, "Oh, may my master not be angry, and I shall speak only this once. Suppose 10 are found there." And he said, "I will not destroy it on account of the 10. As soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, Yahweh departed, and Abraham returned to his place. So what's important about this particular passage, just to give maybe some intro, is as we said, Abraham being the father of faith. We're not going to establish that. I think that's a well-common concept that people know about, is this aspect of, in verse 23, it says there, Abraham came near and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" So there seems to be this sense of justice that exists. You know, is it fair that you would take someone who acts in wickedness, acts in sin, and you're going to punish him, and along with him you're going to punish the righteous? Okay, so this sort of thinking is, okay, well, we don't want this to happen. If we're walking in righteousness, please can't you know, act on our behalf, show mercy for us. Okay, and we have 50 people. Now, if you think of a city, right? So, how many people do you think were in that city? Any guesses?
10,000.
10,000. Okay.
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. Okay. I mean, maybe we don't know all the historical facts, but what's interesting is even if you just look at a modern city, I mean, how even today we're still very popular. So let's just say it's a moderate city of, I don't know, 5 million. 5 million versus 50? What, you don't think so? Unlikely. What do you think?
Probably like 10,000.
10,000. Okay, so let's use 10,000 as the base, and we're saying 10,000 versus 50, right? So what's the sort of ratio there? If we 1 to
20 to 5.
sorry,
5 to 200.
5 to
200.
200, right? Okay, so now if we said, well, we want to spare the city. Now, what is going to happen if we decrease this number? So we keep on decreasing this number. Abraham keeps on decreasing it, and this tilting of the scales in the discussion. And each time, it's still the righteous win. The righteous win. The righteousness of the righteous is very, very powerful. So it's an extremely powerful concept that's going on here with the patriarchs. So I just wanted to just establish that. Are there any other thoughts on that particular passage, on looking through the questions that Abraham is asking and the sort of responses?
Peter?
Yes?
Just on earlier in the verse where it says, and Yahweh said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Since Abraham is certainly going to become a great and mighty nation, and all nations of earth shall be blessed in him.
Yes.
Why in such did Yahweh want to say that he wants to hide from Abraham?
He's not saying he wants to hide from Abraham. He's just saying, should I reveal it? I think there's a difference. So the Almighty can choose to not reveal things to anybody. It's just who He reveals to Gareth.
I think what's quite interesting is how Abraham is even facing up to the Almighty. I think that's, for me, is quite an interesting point, is that he's got, I don't want to say courage in it, but he's approaching the Almighty and he's trying to change his ways. I just find it like, I think that I've got a standing in my house and my son challenges me, but he's not trying to challenge me from trying to knock my authority off, but he's generally trying to see if he can work with me, trying to barter, negotiate with me. And I think it's like Abraham's negotiating with the Almighty, which I find quite interesting because it's the Almighty. He's actually even got the guts to stand before him and really ask to have mercy.
Yes.
And I think that's quite an interesting point. He's going on behalf of people that he may not even know. He's challenging the authority, he's challenging the Almighty, not in a bad way, but in a good way. I like that approach. I'm trying to think if I would be able to do that. But yeah, what gives him the credentials to actually even do that?
I think it's exactly that. You've got to know where you stand with the Almighty before you are in that sense, and it's a very much an intercessory or intermediary position, because you are asking on behalf of other people. So you're stepping in to say, please, can you not spare these people? So yes, Charles.
Abraham does not go before the Almighty to challenge him at all. He says, I'm dust and ashes, will you listen to what I have to say? And he doesn't know the people in the city, but he knows Lot is there, and he doesn't want even the wicked to be punished. So it's a very different mindset to what a lot of groups have, is that, oh, I want the wicked to be punished, come destroy the evil now, it'll be great, can't wait. So Abraham's view is very different, and he doesn't want even the wicked, even if they deserve it, he doesn't want them to be punished. He knows it's the right thing to do. He's not saying you mustn't do it. You do it, but he's appealing to the Almighty. He knows him well. He's a father of faith, so he understands the way the Almighty is, and he's appealing to him that, please don't destroy the righteous as well, for the sake of the unrighteous. And so he is trying to negotiate the best deal possible, for Sodom. And the Almighty is not angry with him, and he is very humble before the Almighty. He has important points. So I think it's nice to see, because you see that all the good people don't really enjoy it. There's also in the prophets where there's an Edom that gets into trouble because they rejoice when Jerusalem is being destroyed. Like, yeah, Jerusalem's going down. And the Almighty's like, well, because you thought it was great when Jerusalem was going down, you are going to be punished. So it's wrong for us to be thinking it's good when the Almighty's punishing people. It's not actually the right attitude that we should have to things. Anyway.
So if we can also just then turn to Exodus chapter 10. So, Exodus chapter 10, verse 17. So let's just go to verse 16. Then Pharaoh hurriedly called for Moses and Aaron. He said, I have sinned against Yahweh, your Elohim, or Almighty, your God, and against you. Now therefore please forgive my sin, only this one, and make supplication to Yahweh that he would only remove this death from me. So you can read the rest of these passages in Exodus. There's a couple of accounts like this where Pharaoh entreats or asks for Moses to pray for him, to say, please pray for me to this Yahweh that you serve, that this might be removed from me. So what do you think of Pharaoh? Was he a good guy, a bad guy?
He was bad.
He was bad, right? So here you have something good happening to a bad person or a wicked person.
Something good.
When a righteous person prays for him, saying, okay, remove this sickness. So if you think about it, why didn't Yahweh just kill Pharaoh? Right from the beginning. Why didn't he just say, you know what, I don't like you, I want to kill you?
Because of Abraham.
Because of Abraham. What else, Francis?
Also in the prophets where the Almighty says, I do not delight in the destruction of sinners. Isn't that also the case for Pharaoh?
Yes.
Even though he didn't even believe in the Almighty. And in a sense also how the Almighty used Pharaoh in a way to prove something to the children of Israel, but he also wanted to actually give him a chance with the 10 plagues to say, listen, I am Yahweh, there is only me. Isn't this sign enough? Turn around.
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting concept that this Pharaoh, who's steeped in all the Egyptian mythology with all his different pagan ways or whatever the case is, the Almighty goes to extreme lengths to try and get him as the head of this nation to acknowledge that there is only one. And I just find that concept of, as we're saying, that this righteous person praying for the wicked in a situation, for the wicked to actually repent. Again, the power of that righteousness. So if you turn also to, we're going to jump to 2 Chronicles. Second Chronicles chapter 6. Okay, so 6 verse 22. If a man sins against his neighbor and is made to take an oath, and he comes and takes an oath before your altar in his house, then hear from heaven and act and judge your servants, punishing the wicked by bringing his way on his own head, and justifying the righteous by giving him according to his righteousness. So here we've got this aspect of if you do wickedness, you receive your punishment. You do righteousness, you receive your reward. Okay? So it's important because we've got these sort of different scales, if I can put it like that. You've got, you do righteousness, you walk in it, you receive a good reward. You walk in wickedness, you receive punishment. Right? But then what were we just looking at with regards to Pharaoh?
You see that he was pardoned.
He was pardoned. It's exactly that. So we've got Pharaoh who is now walking in wickedness, and he's pardoned for something. He's given mercy, he's extended grace. Right? Versus now we've got these two contradictory passages. And so the reason why this is important in the Torah is that these start to actually come up a little bit more and more. So what I'd like to do is just to, this isn't our perspective, but I just want to actually just run you through the argument that is perhaps given traditionally within the Jewish community for why one cannot have atonement for someone to atone for another person. So I think it's important for people to understand, so you can see in the Torah where the passages are, so you can see the pitfalls and the traps, and then to see, well, if you actually look at the complete picture, that's not the perspective that actually starts to come out of the picture, out of the possession. You'll actually see from the Torah, it actually, even within the Torah, it contains this concept of the righteous, or atoning, or standing in the gap for the wicked. So, let me just quickly get my material. So typically an argument would be that, that people are very confident in their position, and they will say the Bible is clear. On this particular discussion, they'll say one person cannot die for the sins of another. In other words, the sins committed by one person cannot be wiped out by the punishment given to another. So the examples that are turned to are, if we turn to Deuteronomy 24. So Deuteronomy 24 verse 16. Okay, so Deuteronomy 24 verse 16 says, fathers shall not be put to death for their sons, nor shall sons be put to death for their fathers. Everyone shall be put to death for his own sin. So this will be then a primary text to say, therefore, you see, you do righteousness, you get rewarded. You do wickedness, you get punished. There's no interchange. So you can also look at passages like Ezekiel 18, as well as then there's another passage in Jeremiah 31, where they're saying people in the future time, people will mistakenly think that one can stand for a righteous, one can stand for an unrighteous one. So those are common passages that people put forward when they say, therefore, from a Torah perspective or a Jewish perspective, you cannot have a Messiah who atones. What is extremely interesting is if you turn also to Deuteronomy 32, Exodus 32. So in Exodus 32 verse 30, it says, on the next day Moses said to the people, you yourselves have committed a great sin, and now I'm going up to Yahweh, perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. Then Moses returned to Yahweh and said, alas, this people has committed a great sin, for they had made idols of gold for themselves. But now, if you will forgive their sin, and if not, please blot me out from your book which you have written. Yahweh said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of the book. But go now, lead the people where I told you. Behold, my messenger shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I will punish them for their sin. Yahweh smote the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron had made. So what we have in this particular passage is we have the children of Israel. They commit idolatry. They go and make this golden calf. And then Moses is actually interceding or pleading on their behalf, and he says, please don't wipe these people out. And if you look there, it says there, forgive their sin, and if not, please blot me out from your book. Now what's very interesting is the answer that's given to him. What is the answer that the Almighty gives to him? Okay, so it's there in the text. It says, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. So again, I'm not saying this is our perspective. I'm just highlighting to you the argument. It says, therefore, you see, the Almighty is saying here that Moses is saying, please blot me out instead of them. And what does the Almighty says? No, each person must die for his sin. So therefore, what they say in the argument is they say, therefore, this idea that someone can atone is actually incorrect. Now, even what's interesting within the argument itself, they will very clearly say that Moses had this really crazy idea that he could atone. So my question is where did Moses get this idea from? Okay. Well, what's your word, Gareth? You said you got a thought there. What do you think?
I was just thinking because you probably would have heard. Obviously, maybe it was passed down about what Abraham had done.
So what was the promise to Abraham? So he's going to take Abraham, a righteous Abraham, and make him what? A great nation. So Moses is now saying, well, Yahweh says, look, I'm going to restart the nation. I'm going to take you, this righteous man, and restart the nation. So it's very interesting. He's now got the same kind of concepts that Abraham has, right? And what's extremely interesting, so I want to show the difference, okay, that it's very easy for any one of us. So I just want to be clear, whenever we read texts, it's very difficult to not interpret, okay, to make assumptions and leaps in our interpretation. So if you look at this passage that we're reading with, it says here, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out. So the leap in the assumption is to say, therefore there can be no atonement. But what does Yahweh say? Does he say, no, Moses, how could you come with such a crazy idea that I would take a righteous person and bring atonement or stand for the wicked? He doesn't say that. So it's extremely important to show this, that Moses had understood this concept. It is inconsistent with the patriarchs, with Abraham. It's very consistent as we were reading. And we'll start to see as we uncover more of the journey that this concept becomes more and more apparent within the Torah, within other parts of the Bible, as well as within the greater body of Jewish literature. It is there, you just need to know where to look. Any thoughts on that with Moses? Okay, so just to point out then, in the typical argument, if you do come across them, they will say that what we have is that people who believe in Messiah what they've done is they've shot an arrow into a tree or into a wall or whatever it is, and then they decided that they would like to go and paint the target around the arrow so that the arrow hits bullseye, which sounds like a very nice argument, except you are actually admitting that it hits the bullseye. Okay, so the whole thing is we have a target, this concept of a Messiah hitting the bull's eye is actually perfectly in line with the Torah. So I just wanted to point out that people even do admit that, like, you've got a very strong argument, so rather than dealing with the actual argument, I'm going to come up with a silly story about that you painted a target around your arrow. Okay, so back here. So coming back to our passage that we were dealing with in Abraham, right?
Peter,
Yeah.
in chapter 32, Moses says, "Blot me out,
Yes.
right, if you don't forgive me." So you can interpret it many ways, but the Almighty then says, "You sinned against me, I'll blot him out." So you could interpret him as berating Moses to say, "I'm sorry, but only the ones that have sinned will be accountable for their sin,"
Yes.
which is what a lot of people try and say. But you could also say that he doesn't address what Moses said. He doesn't say, "No, Moses, that's silly. You know, how can you say something like that to me?" So you could also say that, "Blot me out," and then his response is, "Whoever has sinned against me." So I'm just
Yes.
the point is that Moses, why did he not accept what Moses said? And did he not? And that's the question. Is it that he not accept it because it was a crazy idea? So now we have to say that Moses, who understood the Torah and he said, speaks to the Almighty face to face, came up with a silly idea, which I don't find very likely. Or do we say that Moses was not able to stand for the people, and he wasn't actually, the Almighty wouldn't accept Moses. Moses was not actually accepted.
It's the right concept, but you're just not the right person.
Yes. And so the idea was not a bad idea, but it couldn't apply in that situation. I
Okay.
think that's a
Okay. Very.
yeah.
Very good. Okay, so just coming back to our passage that we were dealing with in Genesis. So we were dealing with Genesis, and the two main concepts that we have are, as we said, this righteous person standing for the unrighteous, as well as then the concept of the wicked receiving his punishment, the righteous receiving his reward. Sort of two seemingly contradictory concepts or approaches, right? So it does seem to, in maybe our Western culture, our Western way of thinking, can't exist together. So what I'd like to just do is, if you turn to Numbers 19. So in Numbers 19, just the first two verses. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "This is the statute of the Torah, which Yahweh has commanded, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, that they may bring you an unblemished red heifer in which is no defect, on which a yoke has never been placed." So this passage is dealing with the red heifer, and if you jump down to verse 12, and you can take it offline and you can read the passage yourself. It talks about verse 11, the one who touches the corpse of any person shall be unclean for 7 days. The one shall purify himself from uncleanness with the water on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day then he will be clean. If you jump down to verse 19, then the clean person shall sprinkle on the unclean on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and on the 7th day he shall purify him from uncleanness. He shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he shall be clean in the evening. So those are just 2 of the verses dealing with this person who then gets this water sprinkled on him that's come from the ashes of the red heifer, and they become clean, right? So if you jump to Numbers 20. So Numbers 20 verses 1 and 2. Then the sons of Israel, the whole congregation, came to the wilderness of Sin in the 1st month, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Now Miriam died there and was buried. So what is common in the Torah is we often have a passage that deals with a certain topic, and then right afterwards we have another passage that deals with a completely, seemingly different or innocuous topic. So what sort of starts to happen within more like the rabbinic community is people start to ask questions. Why does this passage, is it next to that passage? Why do we have these concepts that just, it's not very like a consistent story? It seems to be dealing with this one topic and then suddenly jump to this next topic. And what's interesting is, I'm just going to get my passage here, just to give you quite a well-known sort of perspective on this within the rabbinic community. It says the Torah informs us of Miriam's death immediately after enumerating the laws of the para adumah, the red heifer, whose ashes were used for purification. The Talmudic sages already wondered what connection there might be between Miriam's death and the red heifer. So the question, it comes from a place, as I said, within the rabbinic literature called Moed Katan 28a. Why is the death of Miriam juxtaposed the laws of the para adumah? This teaches us, teaches that the just, as the para adumah brings atonement, so too the death of the righteous brings atonement. So what we see is that throughout history is that the more the rabbinic community, for instance, meditated upon these difficult passages, they started making connections to say, well, actually what it's talking about is it's helping us, alluding to this aspect of the righteous atoning for, or bringing atonement for the wicked. Okay? And a similar place also exists if you look at, like, an example would be with Aaron's clothes. It's juxtaposed to another passage, and then the conclusion within the literature is so too, just as the priestly clothes bring atonement, so too the death of the righteous brings atonement. So just to show that even if we take the discussion outside of the biblical literature, slowly over time people do kind of develop these thoughts within the Jewish community. Now, what I'd like to do is coming back to our apparent contradiction. So within different places within the Bible, these things start occurring. Okay, it's where we start reading and we're saying that passage conflicts with that passage. How do we deal with it? So what's interesting is that these particular ways and approaches of thinking about it's about we don't necessarily understand the context. What is the context of the first passage and what is the context of the second passage? And how do we harmonize them to bring them together? So typically we might not know there's another passage somewhere else that we just haven't thought about that actually clarifies this apparent contradiction. It shows you there's actually a better context. Okay, so particularly, so this one is very useful, and I'll just want to quote the source on it. I have pulled this from Wikipedia on Jethro, on the passage. So I'm just going to actually read you the quote, and then we can look at the passages if you'd like. Okay, so the Gemara, so that's part of the Talmud, reconciled apparently discordant verses touching on vicarious responsibility. The Gemara noted that Deuteronomy 24 verse 16, that's the passage that we read. Remember, that the fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. But Exodus 20 verse 4 says, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children. So the Gemara cites another part of the Talmud that interpreted the words, the iniquities of the fathers shall they pine away with them. So in Leviticus 26 verse 39, to teach that the Almighty punishes children only when they follow their parents' sins. The Gemara then questioned whether the words, they shall stumble upon one another, in Leviticus 26 verse 37, does not teach that one will stumble through the sin of the other. They are all held responsible for one another. The Gemara then answered that the vicarious responsibility of which Leviticus 26 verse 37 speaks is limited to those who restrain their fellow from from evil, but do not do so. So I just want to summarize. So what they're saying is that this aspect of this vicarious atonement is the way to actually how we look at these two passages. We can harmonize that the righteous can actually atone for the wicked, and how you can also still have this concept of you are responsible for your sin. Okay, so if you turn to Romans, Romans chapter 5. There. Okay, so if you just the intro in verse 5, therefore having been justified by faith, we have peace. So the intro to Romans 5 is that we become justified by faith, and then we obtain our peace. Now, I don't want to go into all of Romans 5. If you jump down to verse 7, or verse 6, for while we were still helpless or sinners at the right time, Messiah or Christ died for the wicked. For one will hardly die for a righteous man, though perhaps for the good man someone would dare even to die. But the Almighty demonstrated his own love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So if we jump also down to verse 18. Let's just go to verse 17. For if by the transgression of the one death reigned through the one, much more those who receive the abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Yeshua the Messiah. Verse 18. So then, as through one transgression there resulted condemnation to all men, even so through one act of righteousness there resulted justification of life to all men. For as through the one man's disobedience the many were made sinners, even so through the obedience of the one the many will be made righteous. The Torah came in so that the transgression would increase, but where sin increased, grace abounded all the more. So that as sin reigned in death, even so grace would reign throughout the righteous to eternal life through Jesus Christ, or Yeshua the Messiah, our Master. So what's interesting here is we've got this aspect of the, as we say, this transferal, this grace that gets given by faith. We walk in righteousness. So something gets credited to us. So it's what as we're talking about within the Torah, this concept of someone who knows nothing about who the Almighty is, who decides, I want to just walk in sin, gets shown mercy, okay, and receives that. So one of the dangers is if we only focus on that in our understanding. It's a very important part of our walk, is to make sure that we, through grace, we come closer to the Almighty. Okay, so we carry on reading in Romans 6, and it says there, what shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin so that grace may increase? May it never be. How shall we who died to sin still live in it? Or do you not know that all of us have been baptized into Messiah, have been baptized into his death? Therefore we have been buried with him through baptism unto death, so that Messiah was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, so we too might walk in newness of life. So you can perhaps read that more on your own, but it's what it's trying to guard against is precisely to say, yes, grace is extremely important. We need to have that grace. The grace does not give us a license to say, well, because I've now received grace, I can abuse that grace and I don't need to obey. So they work together. The concepts work together, and we saw that within the Torah. We saw that it was saying that that the righteous must walk in his righteousness. The wicked, he's going to be punished. Okay. But we've also got this concept to say that the wicked can be forgiven, can receive mercy. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that it is a very consistent message, right from Abraham, that we were reading, through to Moses, and then into the New Testament. Gareth, you got some thoughts there? Any other thoughts on that? Johan? Okay, everyone's, yeah.
Am I allowed to say something?
Yeah?
I hear what you're saying, but I just wanted to just clarify my thought.
Yes.
In the case of Avinu Avram, when he atones for the city, I'm seeing it as him being righteous, asking for the salvation, for the city not to be destructed because of the righteous, not because of the unrighteous.
Yes.
So he's...
So definitely that's also a concept that exists there, is that you have Abraham, the righteous, who's actually praying on behalf of the other righteous, that they would not be destroyed, okay, for the sake of the wicked. So it's this whole, and in that scale, he's saying, look, the righteous of that 50, is it not greater than the whole wickedness of that city? So he still has that concept. Does that clarify, or?
So then I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing that a righteous person can atone for righteous people.
Yes.
And that the definition of righteous is somebody that lives by the mishpatim, atoning for other people that live by the mishpatim. And the result would be that wicked wouldn't be destroyed, not necessarily that somebody that's living by the mishpatim can then atone for wickedness.
So what I see in the passage is that you've got, as you rightly pointed out, you do have Abraham praying for that. But what is interesting is he's still saying it's this concept to say you've got the wicked and the righteous acting in the city. So who's greater? So it's more a concept of who is greater in the city. Are you going to destroy everybody, or is not even the righteous of this few people greater than the wickedness of all of the others? I don't know if that...
So I think what she means to say is that there's a contradiction. With Abraham, he was making atonement for the righteous. With Moses, he was making atonement for the unrighteous, for the people who were sinners.
But even with Moshe, what I
Yeah.
saw with Moshe, is that although Israel was in a sinful state at that point, he didn't petition on behalf of their sinful state. He petitioned by saying, for your name's sake, what will the nations say if you destroy these people?
Yes.
He didn't then highlight their iniquity or their wickedness, or because if he did, they were dead.
Yes. Okay. I hear you.
So
Understand?
when I'm seeing in the story of Abraham also, when he's petitioning for the righteous, when the two messengers go in and extract the righteous, that city is
Yeah.
blown.
So if you also then look at what happens also with Moses is throughout the Exodus is also he says, you know, if you destroy this nation that's doing all this evil, what will the other nations say if they hear about your greatness? So even there you've got him petitioning. It's like the same, the parallel of petitioning you for behalf of the people that should be righteous, so that the unrighteous can also hear about you. There is a parallel on that. Charles, you also had.
I think the one with Abraham can be interpreted in two ways. One is just simply that he doesn't want to kill the righteous people in the city. But I think the fact is that the righteous people in the city, they stopped the Almighty's anger from going forth against the whole city. And that's where you get, partly the place you get the concept of a minion, the Jewish concept of 10. And that when you move to a city, which is one of the traditions, you can only move to a city where there's at least 10 other righteous men. So you shouldn't move to a city where there's no other righteous men. That's a traditional view that they've got. It links to this, because then the Almighty will hopefully not be destroying the city. You know, even if there's lots of bad people around you, at least there's 10 good guys and we'll be okay. So the more powerful passage than that one, which is a good one, is Ezekiel 14. Just to look at that, I think we should go to Ezekiel 14:14, because that is I think a clear example of the So it just says it twice in Ezekiel 14, but basically it starts in the beginning, in verse 14, verse 1. These elders come to Ezekiel, and the Almighty says to him in verse 3, these men have set up their idols in their hearts, they have put stumbling blocks of crookedness before their face, shall I let them inquire me at all? So the Almighty is very angry with his people. And he talks about all the idols they've done in verse 6, etc., and the land of Israel is really, really bad. In verse 10, they'll bear their crookedness, and the crookedness of the prophets. Talks about all the false prophets in their land, etc. You know, and then in verse 13 it says, in verse 12, the word of Yahweh came to me saying, Son of man, when a land sins against me to commit a trespass, and I will stretch out my hand against it, and cut off its supply of bread, and send scarcity of food upon it, and cut off man and beast. Even though these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they would deliver only themselves by their righteousness, declares the Master Yahweh. So it's interesting there. If you go down, he says in verse 19, if I send pestilence into the land, and pour my wrath on it, in blood, to cut it off from man and beast, even though Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it, as I live, declares the Master Yahweh, they would deliver neither sun nor water, they would deliver their own lives by their righteousness. So, even though these great men are in the land, the people are so bad that the Almighty is not going, it's not going to be enough. The Almighty will destroy the land. You know, and in Genesis, Abraham talks about the 10 righteous men in the city, you know. And so the point in Ezekiel is that people are so bad that even if these great men were there, the Almighty's anger would not be quelled by them. And so there definitely is the concept of, you know, there's the bad guys and there's the good guys, and the people that are serving the Almighty and that are close to Him, you know, do make a difference. You know, and they, you know, and the whole, one of the underlying concepts in the Torah is this concept of redemption. You know, so you redeem it when someone gets into bondage, you must go and redeem him. When someone, he's lost everything and he gets sold into bondage because, you know, he's got no money, you must go half of it. If he's got nothing, you must go borrow money. You've got every 7 years, you know, and you mustn't say next year is, you know, the year of release. You know, so you've got the cycle of 7 where everyone gets released the whole time. And so the underlying Torah concept is to be free from bondage and to be able to be given another chance. Because if there is no chance to be released, then there is no point. You know, so that's why when guys are on death row, it doesn't matter what crime they do, they're on death row. You know, so when those guys escape, they're the worst, because they know if they get caught, they're on death row anyway, and they've got no hope. They can never get out. So you give someone a life sentence, well, all you're going to do is make him a worse criminal. You can never help that person. That guy's not going to just suddenly, very unlikely for him to come right, because it doesn't matter what he does. He's already been given the maximum punishment. You know, but set him free and say, well, you know, if you set free and you keep the laws, then you know you may not have to go back to jail. If you give him another chance, you know. So that's it's a scriptural concept that, you know, the Almighty does give the nation many times when you should destroy them a chance, and often because of His name, and not because of the righteousness of the wicked. Sometimes not because of the righteousness of the righteous. There's many different reasons, but sometimes you can see the righteous are able to stop these bad things from happening, and so there definitely is a concept of the righteous standing for the wicked. Are you going to talk about the high priest when he dies?
Okay. You can turn there.
I don't know the portion is straight off hand, but it's when
Let's just get it from there.
when someone kills someone in this
Yeah, hold on.
the city of refuge. Yeah, when someone
So let's just turn there first, and then I'll get it for you. So Numbers 35.
Alright, so in verse 12, let's see.
Should we read it?
Well, yeah, verse 12, verse 9. We read from verse 9 to verse 12. There's 3 verses. Yahweh said to Moshe, saying, Numbers 35, Bamidbar 35, verse 9. Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you pass over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall choose cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the one who accidentally killed someone shall flee there. And there shall be cities of refuge for you from the revenger. The one who killed someone is not to die until he stands before the congregation and right ruling. Right? So we can't kill a guy in case he didn't mean to kill the person. There's other passages on this, and Leviticus, etc., where it talks about, you know, investigating the matter and all that type of stuff. So there's a whole lot to this. Going down, you know, it says there, in verse 15, the 6 cities of refuge are for the child of Israel, or the sojourner, the traveller, or the settler in their midst, for anyone who accidentally kills someone, right? You accidentally kill someone, the revenger of blood wants to take you out because you killed his brother or someone hurt a family member. So you need the city needs to take the person and protect him, and then they need to do an investigation and make sure what actually happened and find out whether he did it deliberately or whether he did it accidentally. And then verse 16 says, you know, if you hit him with an instrument of iron, so if you hit somebody in the head with an instrument of iron, it's going to be considered, you know, not by accident. If you hit someone in the head with a stone, which clearly could have killed someone, verse 17, then he's a murderer, etc. So there's specific guidance in the Torah of how some of these things should be done. Anyway, in verse 19, the revenger himself puts the murderer to death, right? So that family can actually kill the person that killed their family member. Anyway, carrying on, it carries on about the whole thing. But then it says, in verse 22, if he pushes him suddenly without enmity, or throws an object at him without lying in wait, or uses a stone, you know, without seeing him, and the man dies, etc. So you accidentally bump someone and he falls off a cliff, you know, or something happens, and it wasn't deliberate. You still killed the person, right? So then it says that the congregation will judge in verse 24 between him, you know, and he will then, for the rest of his life, have to live in the city of refuge. Because if he goes out of the city of refuge, the family can kill him. So he has to live there for the rest of his life, even if it was by accident. If he's guilty, then he gets killed straight away. If he's not guilty, he will stay in the city of refuge. So that means that you had farms, I've got friends, I've got a life, I've got all these things that I had, and because I was careless and I accidentally killed someone, you know, that immediately that I have to go live there. So it's really, really not nice. And maybe your whole family has to relocate to be with you or whatever it is. But the point is, what's interesting about it is that in verse 31, it says, take no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death. He shall certainly be put to death. So it doesn't matter if it's the richest man in the world or whatever it is, or the president or anything like that, if he's killed someone, he will be put to death. Next one, take no ransom for him who has fled to the city of refuge to return to dwell in the land before the death of the priest. So that person who's in the city of refuge, he can't buy his way out. No matter what he does, he has to stay in the city of refuge. So the murderer must be killed, and the guy that's accidentally hurt someone, he's still being punished. Because it's not a joke to accidentally kill someone. It's very, very a very, very important thing. And then the next one says, do not profane the land where you are, for blood profanes the land. The land is not pardoned by the blood that is shed in it, except by the blood of him who shed it. You know, what's interesting in verse 32 that we're trying to point out is that until the death of the priest. So when the high priest dies, that person's set free. So when the high priest dies, you're not allowed to leave the city of refuge. You now can go back and live your life. And that the family that could have killed you because you hurt their family member or killed their family member, they no longer have anything against you. They've got no right anymore. So that right is right here when the priest dies. So that's a very interesting one, and we can have a lot of discussion and commentary on that. But it kind of, you know, is another point where the high priest is supposed to be the most righteous person in the land, and when he dies, certain things are just wiped clear. So that's a very interesting one. Concept. Over to you, Peter.
On that particular point, so I want to turn to a few New Testament passages. Before I do that, so this is from the Jewish Encyclopedia on Atonement, just a small section, and just to provide some context for then some New Testament passages. As I said, the topic is on atonement. Another thing considered by the rabbis as a means of atonement is suffering. Suffering is more apt than sacrifice to win the Almighty's favor and to atone for man. There's a couple of rabbinic sources. You can get them afterwards if you want. Poverty also, insofar as it reduces man's physical strength, has atoning power. Similar power was ascribed to exile, also to the destruction of the temple, which was held as a security, a play on the word Mishkan, for Israel's life. Above all, okay, so as I said, there's quite a few rabbinic literature quotes there. So above all, death atones for sin, and that's coming from Sifrei, Numbers 112, and Malkito and Yitro 7. Let my death make atonement for all my sins, say men when dying or in peril. Bereshit 60a and Sanhedrin 6 verse 2. Particularly the death of the righteous atones for the sins of the people. Like the sanctuary, he is taken as security, mashkon, for the life of the community. So just a very interesting passage dealing with maybe sources that aren't often available or known to people, dealing with this aspect of atonement for all sins. So if we let's turn to a few passages in the New Testament. Hebrews 2. So we're not going to read all of Hebrews 2. I just want to point out in verse 9, but we do see him who was made for a little while lower than the angels, because of the suffering of death, crowned with glory and with honor, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. So this aspect of the Messiah suffering to receive a crown of glory, to taste death for everyone. If you turn to passage, Luke 24. So Luke 24 verse 26. So there, a similar concept. Was it not necessary for Messiah or Christ to suffer for these things and to enter into his glory? We turn to 1 Peter. Find it. Is it after Hebrews? After, yeah. So 1 Peter chapter 3. Okay, so let's go to verse 16. And keep a good conscience, so that in the thing which you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ will be put to shame. For it is better, if the Almighty should will it so, that you suffer for doing what is right, rather than for doing what is wrong. For Messiah also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to the Almighty, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits. We won't carry on reading there, but just as we've been talking, the same concept of the just for the unjust, this aspect of the Messiah making this atonement, this righteous righteousness transferable to the wicked. Okay, yeah, Charles?
I'm just going to say the thing for the wicked is that you can't be wicked and be okay. That's absolutely not what's being said. I'm sure that everyone's on the same page.
Were you here when we were reading Romans?
No, I went to the bathroom, so that might be it.
So just to recap on Romans, so it specifically warns us to make sure we don't fall into that trap, to say, don't think that you can just carry on your wickedness because you have this righteous Redeemer who can suffer on your behalf. It's saying you need to now walk in your righteousness. Johan.
Yeah, I just also maybe got this thought that the same concept with Noah and Lot and everything. Everyone had a chance to be saved.
Yes.
To be safe, and those who accepted and went along with the righteous people, righteous men, were actually also counted with them. They could go onto the ark if they wanted to. They could leave with Lot and his family out of the city if they accepted the Almighty.
Yes.
And still with Yeshua as well. Everyone can still be with him if they accept the Almighty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Could I add something there, please?
yeah, sure.
It seems like quite an in-depth concept, and my thought is that with Messiah making atonement, all sin is atoned for by Messiah, but it seems only the chosen are the ones who then get the benefit of salvation by what it is that he did. Because if you look at 1 John, it says that my little children, I'm writing these things to you so that you may not sin. But if anyone does, so this is 1 John 2, we have an advocate with the Father, Yeshua the Messiah, the Tzaddik. But the wicked don't have an advocate. Even though the wicked may experience advantage from a Tzaddik living in the midst. For instance, Joseph living in Potiphar's house. Potiphar, in my understanding, the Torah doesn't actually tell us, Potiphar doesn't get salvation, but he gets the benefit of Joseph being there. But with the called, the ones who are the elect, then now Messiah's blood makes not only atonement for your sin, but it also gives you the gift of salvation. I think does that add more confusion to the whole thing, or?
I think those are important concepts, and I think that the Almighty is the reason why, if you think of why any of us exist, as Charles said, in the world, is because the Almighty wants us to walk in His ways, wants someone to choose to come closer to Him, and extends more and more mercy to people because He would like them to repent and He would like them to walk in His ways. And people can abuse that, and it's us who then choose to say we want to know Him, we want to walk in His ways, and we want to obey Him. And that obedience then becomes part of our walk. So we don't take it for granted, because it's also, for instance, it does say, like in Romans, that don't boast, because lest you also can get cut off. So just because you get grafted and you get given more mercy than these other people, or whatever your view is, like, don't boast against against Israel, because you can also get cut off. So I think that this aspect of it ties in with like Ezekiel 18, and even though we come to Messiah and we can believe in Him, we can still get cut off. We can actually then choose to walk away and say, no more. I don't want this. I choose wickedness. That is still a choice that we can make, and we can be cut off. Charles, you had something here.
Just on Passover, in Chronicles, the people for a long time, they don't keep Passover, and the king comes back, and Chizkiyahu comes and he says to them that we must keep the Passover, and they send messengers through the whole land. It's in 2 Chronicles 30, and it says the people mocked the messengers who went through the land, saying, come, let's keep Passover. But some people came, and then those people went, and they kept this Passover. And it says there in verse 17, many in the assembly had not set themselves apart, so they were not clean, because you need to be clean to eat the Passover. Therefore the Levites were over the slaughter of the Passover for everyone who was not clean, to set them apart. Many of the people from Ephraim, Manasseh, Yissaschar, Zebulun had not been cleansed, yet they ate the Passover, contrary to what was written. So they came with good intentions. They went against the resistance. People mocked them. They came to do the right thing. They arrived there for the Passover. Their hearts were like, yes, we must do this right thing. And then it says that, even though they were trying to do the right thing, they ate the Passover contrary to what was written. Right? And so what's interesting about that is then it says Chizkiyahu prayed for them and said, Yahweh, who is good, provide atonement for everyone. That is, the Almighty is now providing atonement for everyone, who has prepared his heart to seek Elohim. Yahweh Elohim of his fathers, though he's not cleansed according to the cleansing of the set-apart place. It says Yahweh listened to Chizkiyahu and he healed the people. So what's interesting is, even though they had the good intentions, they still became sick because of their heal. They were sick now because they should not have eaten that Passover, and they became sick. And what's interesting, he doesn't just say provide atonement for everyone. Sort them out, right? So there's atonement. The Almighty provides atonement for those whose hearts are prepared to seek Elohim. I think that's the key. It's those that are actually seeking the Almighty. Those are the ones that the atonement will matter to. And just out of interest, it links to 1 Corinthians 11, where it talks about, verse 29, it talks about people eat and drink judgment to themselves when they drink the body and the blood of the Lamb. And this is a case for that, because you can see when they ate the Passover, they became sick. And we see how there's this fantastic linking between the concept of atonement that's in the Torah and the concept of atonement as referenced back from the New Testament back in. And those concepts are the same. They haven't changed. Anyway, Peter.
Yeah, so just one other thing I'd like to point out, I won't go into where the source comes from, but just to highlight that in the literature, what also happens is that with this death of the righteous one, it's actually meant to inspire people. So when a righteous person dies, it's actually meant to inspire someone to imitate their personal conduct, to imitate their behavior. When you see someone who was really righteous and they actually died for like the wrong reason supposedly, or whatever has happened, it's meant to be this great loss, and you should say, wow, that man was walking in righteousness, I want to follow him, I want to follow his ways. So if you turn to 1 Peter 2 verse 21, okay, so 1 Peter 2 verse 21, let's go to verse 18, we'll just get some context. Servants, be submissive to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. For this finds favor, if for the sake of conscience toward the Almighty a person bears up under sorrows when suffering unjustly. For what credit is there if, when you sin and are harshly treated, you endure it with patience? But if when you do what is right and suffer for it, you patiently endure it, this finds favor with the Almighty. For you have been called for this purpose, since Christ, or Messiah, also suffered for you, leaving you an example for you to follow in his footsteps, who committed no sin, nor was any deceit in his mouth. And while being reviled, he did not revile in return. While suffering, he uttered no threats, but kept entrusting himself to him who judges righteously, and he himself bore our sins in his body on the cross, so that he might die to sin and live to righteousness. For by his wounds you were healed. For you were continually straying like sheep, but now you have returned to the shepherd and guardian of your souls. So it's the same concept. We have this righteous one, this really righteous anointed one, who actually now dies, okay, and is now setting us an example of the characteristics that we are to follow in and are to walk in. And those concepts also come across in some of Paul's writing. He says, follow me as I follow Messiah. So it's very much a case of we've got an extremely high standard to live by, to emulate, to say, I want to be like this righteous Messiah that died for the sake of, even for the wicked. That's who I want to be like. So in my mind, a very good example of, if I was going to choose anybody in life to model my life over, I would say that's a pretty good model. I don't know what you guys think. If we can also turn to, let me just get another passage. Just some other, I guess, slightly more, I wouldn't say bizarre, but unusual concepts about atonement that exist. 2 Samuel. Second Samuel 21. Verse 4:14. Hold on. Apologies. let's rather turn to Proverbs 16. Proverbs 16 verse 4. So 14. Can someone just read Proverbs 16 verse 14 and then also Proverbs 21 verse 18?
Proverbs 16:14. The sovereign's wrath is a messenger of death, but a wise man pleases it.
Okay, and Proverbs 21. Sorry, verse 18.
The wrong is a ransom for the righteous, and the treacherous for the straight.
Okay, so the wrong A, ransom for the righteous, a covering for the righteous, and then also if we can just cross-reference Deuteronomy 32 verse 43. Someone want to read that?
Verse 43.
Deuteronomy 32 verse 43.
O nations, acclaim his people, for he avenges the blood of his servants, and returns the vengeance to his adversaries, and shall pardon his land, his people.
Okay, so that aspect of pardoning the land in Deuteronomy 32, when you read it in Hebrew, it's about providing atonement, linked to the word for kippur, providing atonement for the land. So somehow there's this atonement for the land, which also makes sense in other passages where we read about the year of Jubilee, the year of release. What happens in that year? All debts get released. Okay. Also, that what happens when the people don't obey the Torah? They get thrown out the land, so the land might be appeased. So there's these sort of interesting concepts about the people being connected to the land, as well as this land bringing atonement. And as Charles read, we read with the death of the high priest. When that high priest dies in the land, he cleanses the land, so to speak. Brings atonement for the land and for the people. Okay. So maybe if we can just go back to our Torah, our passage we're reading in the Torah. We were in Genesis chapter 18. Johan, would you maybe just reread the passage that we were from 16 and just try and let's just bear in mind some of the concepts that we've been discussing, so we can see if there's anything else we can bring to light in our passage.
Genesis 18, from
Yes.
16.
Yes.
And the men rose up from there and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham with them to send them away. And Yahweh said, Shall I hide from Abraham that I am doing, since Abraham is certainly going to become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. for I've known him, so that he commands the children and his household after him, to guard the way of Yahweh, to do righteousness and right ruling, so that Yahweh brings to Abraham what he has spoken to him. And Yahweh said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very heavy, I am going down now to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me, and if not, I know. So the men turned away from there and went to Sodom, but Yahweh still stood before Abraham. And Abraham drew near and said, would you also destroy the righteous with the wrong? Suppose there are 50 righteous in the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that is in it? Far be it from you to act in this way, to slay the righteous with the wrong, so that the righteous should be as the wrong. Far be it from you. Does the judge of all the earth not do right? And Yahweh said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I shall spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, look, please, I who am but just dust and ashes, have taken it upon myself to speak to Yahweh. Suppose there are 5 less than the 50 righteous. Would you destroy all of the city for lack of 5? And he said, if I find there 45, I do not destroy it. And he spoke to him yet again and said, suppose there are found 40. And he said, I will not do it for the sake of the 40. And he said, let not Yahweh be displeased, and let me speak. Suppose there are found 30. And he said, I would not do it if there are 30. If I find 30 there. And he said, look, please, I have taken it upon myself to speak to you. Suppose there are found 20. And he said, I would not destroy it for the sake of 20. And he said, let not Yahweh be displeased, and let me speak only this time. Suppose there are found 10. And he said, I would not destroy it for the sake of 10. Then Yahweh went away, and as soon as he had ended speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place.
So maybe just to think about, sort of in context of some of the what we've been looking at afterwards, is there any other new things that you've been thinking about when reading that passage? Or Garrett's got a... So what about, I mean, if you think about it, I guess in a way, privileged position that Abraham must have been in to be able to go before Yahweh to ask this of him. If you think of approaching this infinitely powerful creator, and you're going to now ask him to act on your behalf in a certain way, and ask him to, in some ways, like, don't punish those people, it is quite a I don't know, honor, I would say, to be allowed to even engage in that way, if I could ask, put it like that. And just also from my sort of thinking also is, why did he stop at 5? There's often a question that people ask, and it doesn't give us a lot of detail. Why didn't he go down to 1? Why did he stop at 5? Any discussions on that point, or thoughts? False?
Why did we go further than 10?
Was it 10 or was it 5?
10.
Sorry, 10.
I was also wondering, why did he not go down?
Well, Ezekiel talks about 3.
Okay.
So he's made his point, he's gone for 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. So, I mean, he's appealed 5 times already, I think.
if you think about it, if you ask for 50, why didn't he just go down to 10 straight away? You know, why did he go through a process of saying, well, you know, why not this? I mean, maybe it's a case of if you think about you coming before Yahweh, you don't want to presume too much. So you first want to like see, okay, well, you know, where's this boundary? So you want to be careful in how you approach. And I think it is a very good, you know, it teaches us a lot about prayer, about our own prayer lives, is that we shouldn't be people who demand from Yahweh anything. He made us and we are in His image, so therefore we don't just say, you must do according to what I say. And so this aspect of how we entreat Him, how do we pray, how do we request things, I think it's actually quite a good model to follow. Gareth?
Yeah, I've never thought of the concept that before a favor can be granted, in this case, you see how the Almighty can grant favor and grant mercy, that sometimes he doesn't have to. So the wicked will still perish for their own wickedness. Is that is got to come before that mercy almost. If we're only having mercy, I'm just thinking of like, yeah, it just opened up my eyes on that point, is that you've got a way that at the end of the day the Almighty can still decide. He is still the Almighty. He can decide that, you know, the wicked must be punished, but at the same time He can have mercy. But I feel like it was like just understanding that concept first, that He does reign supreme, has helped me understand the mercy better. It's been going on in my head.
Yeah, but the thing is what in some ways what makes mercy extremely powerful is that you know that there is actually a punishment. Because if you think of it, if you just take a criminal to the streets and you just say, well, it doesn't matter, you can carry on stealing, you know, raping or whatever the case is, there is no consequence. Then he's got no concept of like this is actually wrong.
There is no mercy without law.
Yeah.
If you don't have law, there's no point for mercy. So, you know, why does people need to still pray to Yeshua for forgiveness if there's no law? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
There has to be a standard that's currently in place that is enforcing the way you should live, teaching you what is right and wrong with consequences. And when you cross the line, there's a result which should happen. And those are the times when you ask for mercy, and sometimes the punishment is needed, and other times you can get mercy. And that's also why we can't just run ahead and say, I can't wait to stand before the Almighty. You've got to be really careful what you're asking for. I mean, if people have this arrogant view, I'm just going to go before the Almighty and say this and that. Well, you know, it's like talking to a genie. I rub my lamp, I'm going to give my wishes to my genie, that's an idol. The Almighty is not an idol. You don't control the Almighty. He doesn't have to give us mercy. We are going to go before Him as the great power, and we are going to be very scared, and we're going to hope that we are okay. And we're going to do everything we can to be okay when we go before the Almighty. But other attitudes are not appropriate before the Almighty. So, in any case, the concept of mercy can't exist without the concept of justice and law. Those have to operate together. Otherwise, why is it great that I'm forgiven for something that I'm not in trouble about?
There's no curse, you don't need to say that.
Yeah. So that's also why it doesn't make any sense if Yeshua does away with the law. Then why do we need Him? Why do we need forgiveness anymore? The law's gone away with it. I don't need to ask for forgiveness anymore.
So I think it's important so we can understand both what we've been for the extent of the forgiveness of Yahweh. I think it's important to be able to understand what have we been forgiven of our sins and of our transgressions, and what are those, and as well as to make sure that we are so grateful for that mercy that has been shown and extended to us, that it causes us to say, you know what, I actually want to obey because I've been forgiven, and I'm so grateful for that. I've been called into his kingdom. I've been called to actually be a part of what he wants for me, and that's so amazing. So I think that, you know, that's the, in some ways, what, you know, when it talks about this death of the righteous one, the death of the Messiah, to cause a sinner to find who he is, fall in love with this Messiah that facilitates the forgiveness of your sins, so that you can say, I want to obey. I want to now walk in the ways, as it said, as we were reading there, I think, was it 1 Peter 2 verse 21, I want to follow in his footsteps. I want to follow in the walk that he walked, so that I can, you know, actually not just by name saying, oh, I believe in this Messiah, but I actually walk like this Messiah. And that's important, that if you turn to Romans, I think it's chapter 3, it's the last passage. Sorry, it's Romans 1. Someone want to read Romans 1 verse 17, and someone can turn to Galatians 3 verse 11.
Romans 1,
Verse 17, and Johan, if you can turn to Galatians 3 verse 11.
Romans 1 verse 17, for in it the righteousness of Elohim is revealed from belief to belief, as it has been written, but the righteous shall live by belief.
Okay, and Johan?
Now, this I say, Torah that came 430 years later does not annul.
It's Galatians 3:11.
11.
Yeah.
And that no one is declared right by the Torah before Elohim is clear. For the righteous shall live by belief.
Okay, so this aspect of the righteous shall live or walk by belief or by faith. It's an important concept. The difference between faith, defined in Greek worldview, is a little bit more based on a mental assent versus something from the Torah, and it also reflects in Habakkuk the prophet, and it's quoted by Paul, is that our faith is something you walk by. That is faith. That is what you walk by. So it's important that as we were reading, we find the Messiah, we now walk by that faith that he had in our lives. So I just wanted to leave that with you, and I also wanted to just conclude that there is a very consistent theme that starts developing within the Torah itself, right from the beginning, of this aspect of the righteous standing for the wrong, for the wicked. And it goes through, as you're looking at the concepts in Abraham. We also have Moses having that aspect. We have ancient commentators who, when they've studied all these different passages, who have arrived at those conclusions. It is documented within tradition that those are perspectives that are held in there. So it's not a foreign concept to be expecting or waiting for a righteous one, a righteous Messiah, to die for our sins. So I hope that just puts things in perspective. Just in terms of Johan's been doing some recordings as well. I think there's. Did you bring them? No. Okay.
Your address.
Okay, so Johan's also, there's some material that Johan put together just on a particular topic. If you want to, you can speak to him. Was it on Ephesians or on Romans as well? If you are interested, you can speak to Johan. We've also just got the register. I think Susanna's got it. Izan's got it, so we'll bring it through up front. If you can just fill it in, get your information if you would like to be. We get involved in the next session, so that's in a 6 weeks time. We'll let you know the exact date within the next probably 3 weeks, so you've got adequate time to prepare to come again, to invite other people. I hope it's been a blessing to maybe hear some of the perspectives from within the community, and also from what some of the material that I've prepared, and that can be, as I say, a blessing and a help to everybody here. Charles, I don't know if you've got any other further announcements or anything like that.
No, we can have tea and coffee in the kitchen over there, so the good stuff, and we stay around usually for an hour or two and we chat and fun with the day. So, well, happy to chat further.